something that may be brand new, selling your products and services internationally. For some of you, exporting is not new, but the virtual environment that we're now in and are likely to be in for a long time requires new strategies. So thank you for being here. Now, a couple of items before we get started. Please be sure that you're connected to both your telephone and online WebEx platform to view the presentation. All telephone lines are muted for the entirety of today's webinar. We'll have Q&A sessions at the conclusion of each of the main presentations, so feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time throughout the webinar. If you experience any technical difficulties during our presentation today, please press *0 at any time for assistance. Let's get started. First, I'd like to introduce Layla Roberts. Layla has served as Director of the North Coast Small Business Development Center since August 2016. In this 3-year span, the center has grown consulting services by 15%, training clients by 450%, and its operating budget by 137%. Clients are reporting 7.3% better and more access to financing, 236% growth in successful startups, and 214% more employees hired and retrained. Layla brought to SBDC lessons learned from a 20-year career growing strong community institutions from Philadelphia to DC, Vermont to Bangladesh. In 12 years, with the global arm of the United Way, Layla guided local business and community leaders in 45 countries who wanted to start up homegrown community service organizations. Layla, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and welcome clients from all over the state of California. We are absolutely thrilled to be welcoming our subject matter experts in online international sales this afternoon. The two things that I want to offer are, first, it's always been true that online sales internationally were a really pivotal way, especially for rural small business owners, to grow and diversify their sources of revenue. That has never been more true than today, as at least along the Redwood Coast and certainly across the state, our clients are finding themselves having to scale back, having to adapt and be more resilient than ever, and having to figure out how they're going to survive for what is likely to be at least another year or two of economic crisis, possibly even longer. So my great hope is that this is only the beginning, that you will all take advantage of this and future services to come, both one-to-one consulting and training programs, to start to reach customers in any other country that you think is going to help you to establish and sustain your business now and after the pandemic passes. I do want to make sure, because we have both local clients to our community in Humboldt, Del Norte, and adjacent tribal lands, but also folks participating from across the state, please, if you have not yet already gotten connected to your local Small Business Development Center, I encourage you to do that. Just go on to Google, type in Find My SBDC, and the America's SBDC website will allow you to drill down by zip code. When you've done that, sign up for both training events anywhere in the state, but also no-cost one-to-one consulting, because it is your local SBDC's responsibility to help guide, coach, support, and advise you as you navigate both the pandemic and these opportunities for growing your revenue and your customer base. So from the far coastal Northwest, I welcome you to this webinar, and I thank you for being here, and I hope that this brings you stability and growth, and maybe even the kinds of creativity and international renown that any business deserves, especially if you're an SBDC client. Thank you. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you, Layla, and thank you for all the work you're doing on behalf of small businesses. So I'd like to take a moment to inform those of you who are new to the U.S. Commercial Service that we are the trade and investment arm of the U.S. federal government. We're a division of the International Trade Administration under the U.S. Department of Commerce. Our mission is to promote U.S. exports, to protect U.S. interests abroad, and to facilitate foreign direct investment into the United States. With more than 1,300 employees assisting U.S. exporters in selling their products and services, we have offices all around the world. Domestically, we have over 100 offices, and internationally, we have 115 offices in 75 countries located at U.S. embassies and consulates. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker based in Tacoma, Washington. I'm honored and privileged to introduce the Director of the U.S. Commercial Service eCommerce Innovation Lab, Mr. James Bledsoe. James is a U.S. Air Force veteran and holds a master's degree in international relations from the University of Washington's Jackson School of International Studies, where his focus was China's heavy and light industries and market access. James also holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and China Studies from Washington State University. Thank you for your service, James. You may begin.
Thank you. That was a great and humbling introduction. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar will be covering digital strategies for e-commerce, and that'll include three main areas. First, I'll cover the e-commerce market's overview, giving a general sense and size and scope of what we're talking about when we're talking e-commerce. And then I'll dive into the actual 5 steps of a digital strategy as it pertains to an urgent business need that is identified today. And then I'll wrap up by presenting some online resources available to you for free to develop your own digital strategy. I'd like to bring this slide to highlight for everybody, to highlight the fact that when you think e-commerce, most people think business to consumer and retail, but they fail to realize the larger body of e-commerce that it comprises. Here we can see with some of these statistics provided by reports here, manufacturers and wholesalers are leading B2B sales and transactions. However, the difficulty most B2B are seeing, aside from feeling competition from Amazon, is recruiting the people with the appropriate skills in digital marketing, analytics, website development, minor website development, you name it. Hiring people with these skills to help with the digital strategy and online sales. And for those manufacturers and distributors that were not already investing in e-commerce, they did have plans here to invest within the next 18 months. So really it is a full movement of business, not just certain sectors of business that are going this direction. What does this whole e-commerce, digital economy, e-commerce sales flow look like? Well, here we have the consumer, which is you, me, and everybody else. And then a little upstream to the left, we have the retail business. That is the online shopping website, the storefront, the marketplace. And so right here, this is the B2C transaction. But what we're not seeing is where that retail business acquires from distributors and how those distributors acquire from the manufacturers. Don't leave it to me to just be the one telling you that how these products are being found is through online search. There's plenty and plenty of reports out there that are showing this growing trend that really that supply chain for e-commerce stretches way, way into heavy industry. And so it's no longer just a business to consumer area to focus on, but it is instead a business area to focus and adapt to. Here we have some U.S. Census data of U.S. e-commerce shipments valued by NAICS code. And this is the latest information available, 2016 and 2017. And here you'll see transportation equipment manufacturing being the largest value of shipments, followed by chemical manufacturing, food manufacturing, petroleum and oil manufacturing, machinery manufacturing down there. But I want to draw your attention to about 3/4 of the way down there to leathered and allied product manufacturing, apparel manufacturing, and I'll even throw in textile product mills just to be generous. That right there I would consider to be what everybody looks at and thinks of when they think of e-commerce and retail and B2C. The numbers for the rest of business and B2B are simply staggering and dwarf what people's original concepts of e-commerce really is and what it means to them. So, what are the 5 steps to a digital strategy? Well, digital strategy is very important in order to organize your plan of approach for the digital sales channels. So it's important to define your objectives, conduct some form of search engine optimization to get a baseline of your online presence, both websites, social media, you name it, get some sort of visuals on what is going on currently. You also want to examine your internal needs that you will identify from search engine optimization audits. And somewhere in this process, you're going to be working and conducting some sort of market research that will help you to decide which channel mix is right for you, e-commerce channel mix. Some of you may know that as omni-channel. We call it the channel mix ratio. And then most importantly, establishing key performance indicators for your own business and the online sales channel so you yourself can determine whether or not it is yielding the results that you feel it should for the investment you are putting into it. So for step 1, defining your objectives and strategy. You need to figure out if your site's going to be informational or transactional. Chances are if you're business-to-business, B2B, you're selling large equipment, you're selling industrial products or materials, you're going to be an informational site. You're going to have a lot of information about your products that lead to a sale where somebody's going to be contacting you through the website or a phone number that's on there to make a purchase, but that website has led to that sale. Or will it be a transactional website where you have an actual shopping cart on there and are selling products directly from your website? Or will it be somewhere in between that? Or will you be going another direction along the lines of the e-commerce sales channel mix I previously mentioned with online marketplace storefronts or auction storefronts? You also want to take into consideration your resources. What do you have to invest into this? Do you have access to capital? Do you have access to state STEP grant funds, perhaps? Because these service providers will be costing a lot of money that you'll be running into that when you identify areas in for remedy when you do a search engine optimization. You also want to make sure you do a target market and audience analysis. You want to understand who is buying your products. Are there specific age demographics, gender demographics, societal demographics? Is it international kind of demographic that you're trying to sell to? Who is that buyer and who is that audience? Where do they go online? You need to understand that above all. And then you also need to understand what your competitors are doing. How are they in that online space? Who are your competitors? What are they doing that's successful for them? And is there anything that you can borrow idea-wise for your own strategy? So once you've defined your objectives and have a fairly good idea of which direction you want to head with your online presence, you want to do some sort of search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is your digital cornerstone. Every firm out there should be doing some sort of search engine optimization audit of their website at least annually. I can guarantee you that everybody listening on the line right now has some form of metadata issue or keyword issue that they just aren't aware of. So you need to do some sort of audit, search engine optimization audit, so you become aware of those issues and can fix those. So search engine strategies are based best on starting out with this audit as a baseline. And then it's simply just link building on your website, adding URLs, adding more content and keywords in blog posts and white papers, and also your social media posts and linking back to your own website, as well through marketplaces and alternative media outlets, such as YouTube, which is increasingly being used as a search engine as well. So right here we had to strip out the animation because of the WebEx presentation here, but I will do my best to walk through this very busy slide here. So on the left here, you see the blue web with search on it, and that represents the internet. So you have the World Wide Web and all of those search engines like Google, Yahoo, Ask, MSN, Bing, Yandex, Naver, you name it. They all have, to the right there, a web crawler. They call it a crawler because that's essentially its function. It has taken on the anthropomorphic image here of a spider, but it is nothing more than a mathematical algorithm. And what this mathematical algorithm was created to do was to, and this is supposed to be animated here, so I do apologize, go and index through these red arrows and create an index card for every single page of every single website on the internet everywhere. And why this index card is being created is for Google, the search engine's search page here, when they want to provide results. These results are what this crawler finds and creates from your website on this index card. So the act of search engine optimization is making your website presentable so these crawlers can make these index cards and find the information it needs to when it goes to your website. This example here that would have been animated in, the web crawler would go to your website, for instance, and it would see an image of a tree. Now, this web crawler is, again, a string of code. It does not infer what a picture is. It only knows that it is seeing what you have tagged on the back end of your website, which is image 007 because you didn't think anybody would be reading it. Well, somebody is. This web crawler guy is. And what he sees, or rather should see for this picture, for instance, is you see the coding brackets, image alt, and then Western Douglas fir. These are the keywords, essentially the captioning for this picture for the web crawler. Not for humans, but for the web crawler. So again, this is that SEO process that gets very involved into your website that some of you can do on your own, but many would do much better with a service provider assisting with. On the topic of search engine optimization, for those of you out there wondering how you can get a search engine optimization service, we do have a search engine optimization service we have recently created within the last 2 years called a Website Globalization Review Gap Analysis, and that is exactly what it is. We take two web crawler tools and crawl your website with it to take a look at it how a Google web crawler or other web browser crawler would look at it, and we identify those three main areas that would deem the ability of your website to be found above those of others. We also add internationalization assessments, an aesthetics assessment of your website from the international perspective and how international consumers would be better received on your website with considerations and follow-on to e-commerce business service providers on our e-commerce business service provider directory. There's also continued free follow-on coaching for further developing your digital strategy from your local trade specialist. So the first two steps we covered search engine optimization and defining your objectives. Once you've accomplished those two and identified a bunch of problems that are going to cost you money, unfortunately, you need to decide where you're going to invest that money in. Here we have some figures from some B2B platforms that just shows and gives you an idea that the majority of businesses out there, once they've done some sort of search engine optimization, have identified that they need to invest in the e-commerce platform that they currently have. And by e-commerce platform, I'm talking Shopify, Mozu, Magento, Oracle. It's the software hosting service provider for the website. And so that's what they're investing more in. They're upgrading, they're changing service providers, getting better plans. And nowadays, the trend is going to the cloud service offerings. But another interesting back-end infrastructure interest for businesses is the back-end integration. And that is the software that allows your website to say, hey, we've only got 3 more left in our inventory. You better hurry up and buy, client, on the website. And it's also the software that talks to your client relationships management software that says, hey, welcome back, sign in, here's your previous orders. So more and more businesses are investing in that kind of software. Once you've been able to identify some areas, fix them, you're now ready to choose an e-commerce channel mix. And this is the omni-channel experience. There's service providers out there that will handle these different sales channels for you. They're all great. You should all do your due diligence, obviously, before going with them. But we're going to explore what this e-commerce channel mix actually is here. And that is your own website that is globalized and internationalized, as well as localized in that final step. The social media channels that you may or may not be on. A third-party in-country distributor. I'm sorry, could somebody please mute their phone? A third-party in-country distributor and online marketplaces. So the 4 e-commerce sales channels we have here, we have your website that allows you full data and design control over everything. Unless, of course, you're with Shopify, and then you have full control over the templates that they have provided. But allows you full pricing control and full content control. However, you must do search engine optimization if you're using your website in your e-commerce sales channel mix. And it will require service providers to do it correctly. Social media is another good sales channel, e-commerce sales channel to sell through. It allows you to build a brand following directly with the consumers. It allows you to promote thought leadership, especially for B2B companies when they post white papers and other such thought leadership articles on social media platforms like LinkedIn or Twitter. And it also boosts your own website search engine optimization because on your social media, you should be making direct connection back to your website and vice versa. However, the downside to social media is the results vary wildly. It depends on your product. It depends on your consumers, where your consumers are, current environment, current situations, news, you name it. And then also your activity in social media. How active are you on there also depends upon a lot of whether or not you will make sales to that. Another e-commerce sales channel is online marketplaces. It allows you to reach way more consumers than you normally would. Some of them allow you to receive payments in other currencies. And it also boosts your website search engine optimization because they're on your marketplace storefront, like an Amazon storefront. You should have connection to your website to tell your brand story further. However, the downside to online marketplaces as a sales channel is service interoperability varies from marketplace to marketplace. You may not get on Amazon what you could get on Alibaba or vice versa. That is actually more accurate. There is a lot more competition on marketplaces. Returns and disputes are also an issue to contend with. And then also there is no consumer data that you get from selling through marketplaces that you can consistently rely on as part of a strategy if you were to rely solely on marketplaces. The last sales channel here is the in-country distributor and partner. And what this requires is a search engine optimization savvy distributor, an SEO savvy distributor. It also requires an interested distributor. However, this distributor in country would be able to boost your search engine optimization because they are saying, hey, look at our U.S. products that we're featuring in this country based from this company, linked to your website. And then also on your website in kind, you're saying, hey, you want to buy our products overseas? We have this distributor representing us. Here's their website. That act alone of putting each other's URLs on each other's websites has just given you search engine optimization points, if you will, that increases your likelihood of being found on a search when someone's looking just with keywords rather than specifically for you. So it's a good thing, a very good thing. Further on that third-party in-country distributor, if that is a sales channel that does interest you and one you want to investigate further, our organization, the U.S. Commercial Service, and our local USIAC can assist you with an international partner search or gold key matchmaking service. So simply just contact Elizabeth Krauth after this if you're interested to learn more. So once you've established your objectives, you've done search engine optimization to identify what needs to be fixed. You've fixed that through identifying back-end infrastructure areas to improve. And you've started to figure out your e-commerce sales channel mix by doing market research and understanding how and where your prospective buyers are buying products internationally online. At some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, you should establish key performance indicators for e-commerce sales. A lot of businesses don't do this. Now, what are these key performance indicators? Well, they're based off of the data collected from your website analytics. If you don't have analytics or you're not looking at your analytics that you have set up on your website, you should change that and start looking at them today, understanding them, because they represent a dashboard of your online business and will allow you to get to developing actual key performance indicators that will allow you to put a dollar amount to your online activities and allow you to finally define a return on investment from your activity if you have not already done that. So here we have the conversion rate, an industry general key performance indicator, and then also digital marketing return on investment. And what these two key performance indicators do is take your own business information and then you plug it into these simple formulas, and they allow you to get a simple baseline, a simple starting figure at what that is. So say, for instance, you have a service provider that says, oh, we can get you X amount of increase on sales if you just let us do this campaign for you. You say, okay, well, let's verify that. And after they're done doing that, you want to see if your conversion rate, your sales conversion rate has gone up at all. You want to plug in your sales and your leads and the appropriate records that you've kept leading up to that. Hopefully you are keeping those records. And you can come out with an about conversion rate of are we going up or going down as a result of the work that this service provider has done for us. And just so you know out there, the industry quote-unquote average for website sales conversion is 1.5%. That is very, very general and very generous, but definitely think of yourself proudly if you are more than that as a conversion rate. So definitely look into establishing key performance indicators as a part of your digital strategy so you can determine whether or not your efforts are paying off. So what are the top e-commerce issues that the U.S. Commercial Service at our local USIAC, Elizabeth Krauth, and the rest of us can help you with? Well, first off is the lack of a business digital strategy and know-how. Most businesses don't even know this is a problem. In fact, I didn't know this was a problem until we started researching it, and people smarter than ourselves started identifying that. And that's what led us down this road to develop our commercial service digital strategy counseling. There was a problem, we needed a solution, we developed one. So with this U.S. commercial service digital strategy counseling, our trade specialists will help you go through these 5 steps over the weeks and months required to develop your own digital strategy and provide you with online resources to help you keep going in that direction towards success. Another area that the U.S. Commercial Service can help you with is lack of awareness of who can fix these issues that arise when you do a search engine optimization audit of your website, and you know you have metadata issues that need fixing, you know need to go do this and that. Who does that? We've also identified the issue, identified the need, and have created an e-commerce business service provider directory referral process where companies, business service providers in the e-commerce realm, digital marketers, cybersecurity, web developers, translators, you name it, all contact us, and we do a simple screening process whereby we make sure that they are focused on an international sales clientele. They're not just about local dentists, or nonprofits or things that aren't pertaining to international, and that they are U.S. based. Another area that the U.S. Commercial Service can help you with is identifying non-tariff barriers. Believe it or not, selling through our e-commerce, you can still experience non-tariff barriers by way of unreasonable regulations or paperwork that customs requires of you when you try to get your product there in country. That still happens because there is no legal difference between a traditional transaction or an e-commerce transaction. So our old business counseling that we've been doing for decades here in helping businesses with non-tariff barriers is definitely something that we can help with, as is shipping and logistics issues and online payment service provider issues, finding those. So as you're doing your research, hopefully you're looking at our free resources on trade.gov. I wanted to direct your attention towards online market research resources specifically. And if you're looking to get started in that and aren't quite sure how to get started in that for business and exporting and international sales, we actually have starter videos on how to get started on that business market research process. And in addition to that, we have specifically e-commerce information and resources on there to include the information contained within these slides, as well as more information to help you guide your business towards success in sales in the online channels. Lastly, or second to lastly, I'd like to highlight our e-commerce video series. We did not cover these contents in these videos in this presentation. So if there's more information you want to know about other areas of e-commerce and issues for business, I encourage you all to visit our trade.gov website and check out any one of these 5 videos to see if that has any further information or resources to help you out. The last resource I will highlight again is, I mentioned before, the e-commerce business service provider directory. This was created to provide a screened outlet of service providers that are focused on international sales for businesses, and we categorize them by business interests, hopefully in a way that will allow you to find the solution for the problem that you may have or will find in the future. Here we have the STEP grant program information. If any of you are interested in the STEP grant, please contact any one of the hosts on this webinar, including Elizabeth Krauss, my contact at the local U.S. Export Assistance Center. With that, thank you for your time, and I would like to hand the microphone back over to Elizabeth.
Great. Thank you so much, James. That was an excellent presentation, and look forward to sharing the information. I can put the links into the chat box so people can see them. But first, I wanted to see about questions. If you have a question, if you could type it into the chat box so that we can get started with questions for for James. And while you're typing, I have a question of my own, which is, just putting myself in the position of being a startup, a small business, and thinking that I've got some really great products that I want to sell internationally. How would you recommend, James, that I go about my first step? Is it to build the website? Is it to build the international features into the website? What would you say is my best first step?
Well, before you can do anything online, you definitely have to have something online. So I would think naturally having that website is the first step, and then it's the continual improvement of that website through understanding it a little bit more thoroughly, and then fixing the errors that happen to it. Because what a lot of folks, I think, don't realize is that websites aren't a set it and forget it type machine. They're definitely much more like a plant, kind of. You have to constantly go back and do maintenance to it to make sure that it stays looking the way you want it to look. Otherwise, like a plant, it'll start looking terrible with enough neglect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another question that's come up is, for those companies who don't wish to establish an online marketplace, say they sell large equipment, or say their products are very customizable and have to be priced very specifically for each customer's application, those folks who haven't really used their website much as a sales tool, how would they best adjust it to have the most effective informational website for international buyers possible? What would be the first step in that, and some key facets to that improvement?
Honestly, I think it's a change in perspective. You shouldn't be looking at a website or your website as a website in that situation. Your website is your customer acquisition tool, because that's essentially exactly what it is a customer acquisition tool. The information you have on there about your products, your process, your service will lead to that sale, because more and more people, and reports and information back this up, are searching online. They're looking for information online. They have questions, they have issues and problems, and one of the main reasons that people go online is for answers, the other being to shop. And so really, if you're not providing that outlet to shop, you need to be providing that outlet of information. Otherwise, why are you online?
Great. Okay, and what I've done, everyone, is put into the chat box so you can copy it down, or those links that James talked about. Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat. Does anyone? Okay, well, at this point, let's move to our final speaker. Thank you again, James. Our next speaker is Jeff Williamson. He has 25 years of global marketing experience in the public and private sectors, having conducted business in more than 50 countries. He's currently the director for the California State Trade Expansion Program, or STEP, which led over 900 California businesses in 80 overseas trade missions and exhibitions since 2011 in the aerospace, information technology, food and agriculture, medical equipment, and consumer goods industries. From 2004 to 2018, Jeff led the statewide Centers for International Trade, CITD program, and from 2010 to 2012, he was an executive on loan to the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GOBIZ, appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger to facilitate multiple governor-led trade missions to China, Germany, Canada, Korea, Japan, and Mexico. Thank you, Jeff, and please begin.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the introduction. I think, and thank you, James, for setting out, I think, a really nice table for everyone to consume about, digital strategies going forward. So what I wanted to do is share with you just a few observations, what's going on, trends in trade overall, and then walk you down one of the channels that James mentioned, which is the marketplaces, so that, drill down a little bit more detail as far as what some of these channels can offer. And they're not all channels are for everybody. So let me go ahead and pull up the trade outlook. Can you see my screen, Elizabeth? Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to see if I can go ahead and, let me see here. How do I advance this? You have to pardon me. The first time. Okay, I'll go ahead and advance right here. Okay, so this is a quote from Warren Buffett, but, right now, obviously, it's a very difficult environment, and but over the long run, at least what this famous investor has shared with us is he believes it's going to bounce back, and I think it will too. I think it's just a function of time, and we're just uncertain about what that time looks like. So I just want to go over what's happened previous to COVID-19 and the big sort of economic shocks that have been going on. If we dial all the way back to 1997 and the Asian financial crisis, the U.S. and particularly California, we were not as exposed to Asia. Although this was a really significant event, it took many countries in Asia 4 to 5 years to recover back to their previous levels. We just weren't as exposed to Asia back in 97. On September 2001, we saw a 5% decline in exports, which recovered fairly quickly, and then the Great Recession saw about an 18% drop in exports, and the recovery time there was about 14 months. Right now, in the first half of the year for COVID-19, we've seen exports drop 14% in the first 6 months. So this is potentially 20 to 25% for the full year, and it could involve, obviously, a longer recovery time than the Great Recession. Here's a few of the additional figures to consider. Both our imports and exports are down. Auto sales in the second quarter, this is a rather interesting situation that both the U.S. and Europe are down significantly. However, China's year-over-year auto sales were actually up by 17% in the second quarter. Now, they did emerge from COVID, and maybe this was pent-up demand for autos, but it's a positive indicator overall. E-commerce, and James laid out a whole bunch of different strategies and options. What experts are calling this is 3 years and 3 months. In other words, this is how quickly e-commerce has advanced as a main, value delivery network for companies to be able to reach and serve their customers. Also, turning back to China, their imports have risen by 2.7% from a year earlier, and exports are back on the rise. So this gives us a picture of kind of what's going on in other parts of the world. From an export standpoint, we expect, in fact, that exports and trade will dip and dip more significantly than our domestic trade. And that's just more or less a perception of risk that, when we hit these recessions, businesses move forward carefully when there's a lot of uncertainty, and obviously international trade involves some risk. But this can come down to what I'm going to suggest is a market timing issue. So the exports and trade overall is going to shrink dramatically as a result of COVID, but it's also likely to rebound much faster. And so right now, I don't know that we found the bottom yet, but in the event we do, and some reasonable sort of forecasting returns to the market, then we're likely to see a rapid rebound, if you will. The strength of the dollar has been another issue that actually has been going on for a long time, and I noticed this when I was taking groups to Hong Kong, and back in, let's say, 2015, the Chinese, devalued their currency by 5%, and they said, well, what is going to be the effect on U.S. exports to China? In fact, I was on CNBC when they asked me about that, and when we look back at all the numbers, what we recognized was that, in fact, it was not going to have a tremendous effect, because the bigger effect actually was the value of the dollar in relation to the euro, because the Europeans, are exporting, in this case it was food products, are exporting a lot of similar products to China, and our currency with relation to the euro changed more than 30% in the course of 2 years. So they became 30% more price competitive. And I want you to consider this when you start getting into e-commerce, because e-commerce is going to promote price transparency. Shoppers in other parts of the world are going to index, they're going to index the value or index the price that they want to pay for a particular product. Let's say it's a bottle of KPIS 2018 Cabernet Sauvignon. You can find it on wine.com for $79.99, and a few other places like $75. It's a well-known brand. And so people might look for this. And, of course, if somebody's in a foreign market, they're going to add in the price escalation issues, the tax, the transportation, other things. And let's say that's going to add another $25 to the price, or maybe $50, and sometimes it can be much more. So that value of the dollar, it becomes a leveraging point. So if the dollar starts to weaken, then all of a sudden that same product is going to become so much more price competitive. And the consumers are not following exchange rates all the time. And in fact, even in an e-commerce scenario, companies are pricing in local currencies. They may not register the exchange rate differentials, and 3 months later they say, wow, that's a really good price. I think I'll go ahead and buy it, because it's representing their local currency, and they might not even notice why until they look back and say, oh, okay, I see. The dollar has weakened. So right now, given the situation, the scenario, there's been a slowdown in trade. The dollar is very strong. So we have a number of headwind right now, and my point is the timing, it could be very strategic to start preparing now, because that rebound, you can be very well positioned for that rebound. And potentially, if we head into a weaker dollar, which a lot of countries like to weaken their currencies as a strategy to come out of a recession, there's going to be pressure to do a number of these things. So it's about being prepared. Here are some of the longer-term trends. I won't get into these in great detail. A lot of experts say we've hit peak globalization. We have decoupling of supply chains. And then, of course, we have the trade becoming more regionalized. Urbanization, digitization are driving a lot of changes. I mean, we've seen even urbanization. One thing we saw during COVID were the massive challenges when people in emerging markets who were moving into the cities to work and then their migrations back home. These are some of the largest migrations in human history, like during the Chinese New Year, for example, and so on and so forth. Some of these cities lose up to 25% of their population returns to their villages in many emerging markets to visit family and friends, and then they return back to the urban centers to earn a living. So there's a big issue still with urbanization as being a driver for changes in buyer habits. I want to point out something, too, that this trend has been going on. I put a few asterisks there for Huawei, but emerging market multinationals are now becoming global competitors. And we've heard the news about Huawei. Then you have other companies here from Southeast Asia, from Africa, from India, from Brazil that are becoming leaders, right, global leaders in their respective business segments. One thing that is likely to happen is that these companies are going to solidify their positions in their markets during this challenging time of COVID. Now, why do I mention that? Because when we talk about e-commerce and how does this relate back to e-commerce, you take a look at a company like CP or Jerome Poquepon. Jerome Poquepon is the largest retailer in Southeast Asia, and they own nearly all the 7-Elevens in Thailand, and they own Lotus, Tesco Lotus. They're a huge retailer, and they have ended up creating strategic partnerships with bigger marketplaces like the Alibabas of the world to provide an O2O solution. And if your products ultimately can be sold into a major retailer, you can look at e-commerce both as an end game in and of itself, but also as a pathway to get into physical distribution. So these type of joint ventures, like between CP and Alibaba and Central Group and JD, for example, what they do is they allow the retailers to preview products. You know how difficult it is if you're trying to sell into mass retail to develop that account and capture the buyer's attention so that you can even get a meeting. And this can be a several-year process to get a well-known product onto the shelf of a retail in a foreign market. And so by looking at the linkage between what they're doing and what they're doing in the e-commerce sector, is e-commerce provides them an opportunity to view the products without making an investment in time and space in the very, very expensive retail locations. So this is also something that I think is quite obvious. You know, up until 2019, nearly half of all of the trade, all of the retail trade was being created. Half of all of the increase in retail trade, I should say, was being created by e-commerce. So that's obviously what we're talking about right now. I won't get into China Phase 1, but there is a Phase 1 trade deal. A lot of it surrounding, there's a lot of activity right now with agriculture. We had one of the biggest corn shipments in the history of the United States to China last month. So there is some progress there, but there's a lot of noise and diversions from what is and could be going on with that Phase 1 trade deal. Looking at the marketing mix, you know, this is sort of looking at the full range of the different marketing mix elements, the 7 different Ps, if you will. You know, looking at the products themselves, okay, price, but the actual placement, the promotion moving into digital promotions, moving into channel-appropriate promotions. Those are quite different from the physical ones, whether we're talking about the social media linkage, live streaming, and other tactics that the e-commerce environment uses to attract buyers. And then, of course, the issue related to your marketing messages about your products. And these are 4 really important questions that we look at in the marketing field to ask ourselves, well, is our message even reaching the target audience? So that medium, how are you reaching the target audience? It could be search words, but even if we get into search words in other countries and even in other English language speaking countries, those search words can be quite different. And then there's indexing to the local CCTLDs or the country top level domains like the KR for Korea or the DE for Germany. A lot of search engines, they index towards the country level, top level domains. So having those set up can be helpful in reaching more of your target audience as well. Are they understanding your message? And then finally, are we really, is there other noise getting in the way? Trade disputes, other things, just COVID in and of itself. And then finally, on this segment about trade, I just want to share with you a few observations we've had. With air freight, companies are facing higher prices and, in fact, even delays, delivery delays. I know those have really become acute in the last couple of weeks. I've talked to several companies, and everything from food delivery business to cross-border to folks have run into problems with some of the major delivery companies because they're just expanding capacities becoming an issue. And then on the ocean freight, it's just now starting to recover. So I wanted to give you that trade update before I jumped into actually the cross-border e-commerce. So let me go back to this one channel. So looking at cross-border e-commerce, the whole market is shifting, obviously, in this direction. James mentioned that. But this is a look at the total global retail, and I'll look at the e-tail as opposed to the B2B, because this is something that everybody can, I think, relate to directly, is that there was about $29 trillion in global retail sales last year, and that grows about 1.5% above total population growth. So that's really tied to population growth to some degree or another, but it's just a nominal 4.5%. E-tail, on the other hand, is growing at about 20% a year, and it was responsible, like I said, for half of all the global retail growth in the past year. And narrowing that down from e-retail, which if you are a consumer products company, then and you want to sell your products in Germany, for example, you can go on Amazon, but a lot of companies will fulfill their sales on e-commerce marketplaces through a local distributor. As James pointed out, a local distributor is a very powerful and, in many cases, a very necessary partner in most markets around the world. In fact, for small businesses, not only are you going to hear it from people that promote trade, but actually in places like the Journal of International Marketing, a number of studies have been done that identified one of the most important and critical success factors for small companies and small exporters in terms of their ability to grow their international business has been the quality and depth their international partnerships or international business relationships. So those partners fulfill a very important role. When it comes to e-commerce, they are typically going to be the fulfillment partner in another country. So there's that part, and then there's another part called cross-border, which I'd like to share with you, which is instead of having a local partner fulfill products, in Germany for Germans, you're going to have an opportunity to sell directly and ship directly from the United States to customers in other countries around the world. And we call this cross-border e-commerce. It's a smaller section of the business. It's around $600 billion a year right now in cross-border e-commerce out of the $4 trillion. So it's around 12% of the total e-commerce sales, e-retail sales at least. And here's a look at the different marketplaces and where they are. Obviously, Amazon, if you want to pursue, Europe, Germany, UK, and Japan, for example, Amazon has a very strong presence. And Amazon actually just overtook Flipkart in India to become the #1 e-commerce company in India in terms of sales. So Amazon has its footprints in various markets, but it's not entirely global, right? It's not entirely global. In fact, in many cases, it's missing from China and from Southeast Asia, which you put together, and that's around 2 billion people. So the marketplaces themselves, and once again, this is the Amazons, the Alibabas, JD.com. So what they do is they provide some benefits to buyers that buyers cannot easily get by searching online through various websites. And one of them is what retailers actually really do, what retailers do very effectively for consumers is they create selections of products. They provide a display of those products to a large audience. And then finally, they help the customers to acquire the products. So that's all transactional issues. So again, it comes down to selection, the display, and the servicing. And where these marketplaces actually do really well is they satisfy other sort of demands by the consumer. So the consumer wants convenience, they want attractive prices, and they want a big selection. And so that's what these marketplaces are oriented to do. They also provide things like shopping extravaganzas. And these are events that occur throughout the year at select times during the year. One of the more famous ones is going to be 11/11 or Singles Day in China, which is the largest single shopping day in the world. And they just finished up with one which is the second largest day, which is 6/18. So they have shopping extravaganzas that attract a lot of buyers and get a lot of product visibility out there. The other thing that these marketplaces do, particularly in emerging markets, is they provide a signal to the consumer of authenticity. And in emerging markets where products can have their, or companies face trademark infringement, there's squatters on your product, there's copycats, there's sort of street selling merchants that are, mimicking your products and potentially, using your brand name. The consumers in these markets are very, very suspect of products when they're sold online, to the extent that they want additional assurances that it is in fact a genuine product. And just to give you an example how finite this becomes, that they have buyers, and, I work very closely with people, in China, Southeast Asia, and many of my friends actually use these services over there. And what they'll do is they'll go online to look for a pair of Nike shoes, and they can find it by 3 different vendors, the same pair of shoes, but the vendors they'll list where the vendor is sending the product from. Is it China? Could be Germany, could be United States, for example. And they'll have 3 different prices. And so by virtue of the fact the product is available in 3 different places for 3 different prices, one of the ideas that pops into the consumer's mind, well, which one is one of these fake? So that's a really big issue that I just wanted to share, particularly in emerging markets. They look to these marketplaces to provide them with that guarantee. Now, for the seller, you're going to get market exposure. It's a lower risk to entering foreign markets, and you can have all of the sort of sale logistics taken care of. These are the top product categories, and I say product, not services, but these are very common in most of the marketplaces around the world, whether it's in Africa, South America, Europe, Asia. These are the common sort of categories, and it all makes sense because there's specialty goods in here, unique, hard-to-find items, and typically small and, a lot of value packed into a small box, so it's easy to ship. This is and I'll send out this schematic, this presentation to everybody, but this is a schematic of how actually cross-border e-commerce works. And what I want you to consider is if you are a producer, you would be just simply on the production side. And the typical transaction would be where you would deliver your products to a local warehouse or a third-party logistics provider who will then handle all of the ordering and fulfillment for the online marketplace. So let's say somebody's in, let's say they're in Southeast Asia and they want to order through JD.com. Well, you can ship your products directly from the United States and have a 3PL do that. You can put the products in a bonded warehouse in market and have the products fulfilled from there. And there's different advantages from doing one or the other. But in the end, you're not handling all of the logistics. A lot of that stuff will be handled by your 3PL, the ordering, the fulfillment. You will handle even customer service, and returns can be handled through a third party. Here are some of the reasons why this cross-border, why it has become popular and why it is growing. One of them is that there's a personal exemption. So, as you know, when you come back in the United States, you arrive at customs and they say, do you have anything more than $800? And you're like, no, and they wave you through. Well, that $800 exemption actually applies to you as a consumer as well. So if you want to purchase something from another country, a consumer item, have it shipped directly to you, then if it's under $800, you will not be responsible to pay any tax. That's your personal exemption. And so other countries around the world have similar personal exemptions. Not as big, for example, but you can see China has a $750 exemption, Singapore $300, Australia $500, and there's a few others. And under a cross-border e-commerce program, these products will typically be imported and sold directly to the consumer. As long as they are under that dollar amount, they will not be paying any tax, or they will pay a much lower tax. So let's look at China, for example. Wine, Okay, so wine, we had a trade mission to Hong Kong about a year and a half ago, and China had just slapped a huge duty on wine. So the effective rate for an importer in China was around 75% on a bottle of wine, right? Because you had the excise tax, you have the VAT, and then you have the import tax. There's 3 taxes, and all of that added up to around 75% after they imposed the additional duty. Well, they scaled that back. They took off 25%. And so right now, this is great news for wine exporters to China, is that they scaled it back to around 48-49%. Well, that includes 24% import duty. On a cross-border transaction, it would be 9.9%, or I think actually for wine it's 9.2%. So instead of paying 40% in tax, or nearly doubling, right, or 1.5 times the value of the product just to get it in, actually you're saving another 10% by going through cross-border. And for a country that's selling 40 million bottles of wine online, it's not a bad deal. Many of them are over 350 RMB. The second benefit and reason why cross-border has become a popular channel is because some products face regulatory hurdles, and some are difficult hurdles to overcome. So, for example, cosmetics in China, they have to be subjected to animal testing, for example. And so if you are selling into a cross-border scenario, you don't have to meet and label and meet local regulations. They consider this type of purchase by a citizen as being one similar to them having traveled to another country, put it in their suitcase, and then come back home. And so that's sort of how cross-border works. It's treated like that as well. Okay. Here are some of the challenges for sellers in this space. One of them is that getting into a marketplace and a cross-border provider, Alibaba, JD.com, Lazada, so on and so forth, it's like selling to a retailer. It really is. I mean, it's very similar to that. There's an onboarding process. You have to have a good digital library to be able to provide all the product support materials. They don't want just a picture of the product. Sometimes they want to have video. They want to have demonstrations. They want to have articles, additional product details to make it more appealing to the consumer. And all of that would be localized into the local language. There's some sale logistics companies have to become familiar with. And then, of course, there's a number of activities in positioning for what we call these peak selling opportunities. Some of these I mentioned already, Singles Day 618. There's others, but that's when huge volumes of products are sold. So learning how to navigate and position your company to sell during those peak selling times can be the difference between having it be a very successful venture and just a ho-hum, activity. Again, it's competitive. The price transparency is a big issue. Consumers in other markets, they will, some data shows from some markets, if they plan to buy locally, 80% of them will check the price on Amazon. They'll go to Amazon and check the price before they buy from their local e-retailer. So one of the sort of recommended rules of thumb is to, try to maintain prices, if you can, at plus or minus 10% from one market to another. When you're way out of whack, that could slow down customers' desire to purchase your products because they think they're just paying too much. The other thing, I guess, is over in the IP category is again, all these marketplaces require evidence of intellectual property, trademark ownership, and that's a good thing because it keeps others out, maybe keeps out your distributors or, gray traders picking up and selling your product. But there's a lot of squatting we're finding out on trademarks in many places around the world. Companies didn't go out and scoop up all the trademarks in all the different markets, and then they go to start exporting and they find out somebody else already registered their name. So this is a big challenge, and hopefully, there's ways to walk through that, but it tends to be a little bit of a challenge there. Now, I'm going to, one thing here. So, Elizabeth, that's it for my talk on cross-border. Perhaps I can share, let me share my screen very quickly, and I will pull up my presentation that I just, let's see here. I'll pull this one up. Okay, right here. This is my updated version. Pardon me for a minute. Okay. So let me pull up this right here. Okay. So we talked about the California STEP program. James brought that up. And I'm just going to share with you the website address. It's all pretty self-explanatory there. But every year we run about 8 to 10 different events. But obviously because of COVID, those have been shelved. So we run trade missions, or we organize trade exhibitions. And the second thing that is very popular for a lot of small companies is we have a program called the Individual Company Export Promotion. And what you can see on the screen right now is a URL. It's at californiaexport.org/ICEP. And that explains the whole process, is explained on how you, as a small business, qualified small business exporter, can apply for funds to support your export promotion and export engagement activities, which could include, paying for U.S. Department of Commerce services, any number of the services that they offer. Or it could involve participating in a virtual trade mission or doing website localization. So I just want to point out that this program is, it gets subscribed very quickly, and we are still accepting applications under this ICEP program, but it will shut down briefly as we change over to a new fiscal year. So if you have something in mind already, I recommend you go ahead and apply, because we will be closing the window for about 3 to 4 weeks here. In about, I'd say about the next week, we'll probably close the window for applications and then open it back up in about 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's obvious
You're
you have a
welcome.
lot of experience and knowledge in these areas. And I want to open it up for questions. If you have a question, please just type it into the chat box for either of our speakers, James or Jeff. And while we're waiting, I have a couple that I wanted to bring up. One is, so Jeff, speaking of STEP, can you talk about the actual process? So in terms of some of the trade missions that you've run, can you give an example of a company that has used STEP funds and kind of walk through the process?
Okay, so yes, I mean, we have sponsored, like we said, a whole, probably about 100 trade events over the past 9 years or so. And so typically on the STEP website, we will provide a package where we get space at a trade show, we get discounted, we break up the space we get public relations, we set up matchmaking, all those things we put into a package, and we use step funding to reduce the cost of participation. That's one thing. And so, at Singapore Air Show, we've been doing that every other year, and some companies, like one company that does hydraulic equipment for loading ordnance on military jets and military aircraft, they got a $10 million order in Southeast Asia because of, through, their participation in the trade show and just cultivating those relationships. So anyway, what they would do is they would sign up for the event. We would get their space, everything, and, get all of their product information and details, forward it over to the people doing the matchmaking, ensure we have all their graphics, everything in place for the exhibition. But for the individual company export promotion, a company will go in to register on the step registration. I'm going to recommend they go to that page I shared first, which is californiaexport.org/ICEP, and they will fill out an executive summary of what they are requesting the STEP funds to do. And once they've submitted their registration along with that executive summary, that'll be reviewed by the STEP program and by the agencies in Sacramento. And once that has been reviewed, they'll make a determination as to whether or not it'll be funded. Now, I will share some interesting statistics for you, is that we have a very, very high percentage of first-time submissions being funded. I think it's over 90%. So this is for companies that apply for the very first time. They meet the eligibility requirements, and they fill out a complete application, an executive summary. We have been funding most of those first-time applicants. Companies can come back a second time and apply for more funding in a subsequent year, but it's only limited to 2 years. After that, they become ineligible. We've had companies like actually there's a great company called Germ Falcon, and I was just teaching an MBA class, and one of my students had to produce a report on something that's in the news, and they picked out Germ Falcon. And I said, well, geez, I know these folks. What they did is they applied for funding to go to a couple of years to go to a trade show in Germany that we didn't have listed. So it wasn't one of our 9 or 10 events. It was something that was just for aircraft interiors. And what Germ Falcon does is it's made by Daimler Company. What they do is they sanitize. They have a machine, a contraption that goes down the center aisle and sanitizes all the surfaces in the airplane. And so we've been working with them for a few years. And, of course, when COVID hit, their product just became like the star of the business. And, in fact, they have just entered, as a result, they entered into a major strategic partnership with Honeywell to have their products used, that Germ Falcon sanitizer, to be used all over the world. So these are some of the things that can happen, not for everybody, but it can happen.
So I'm hoping we can shift gears a little bit from kind of industrial equipment and aerospace to industries that a lot of North Bay and North Coast companies are in the food and beverage. So you all have been active in that as well, and in the STEP program. And so do you want to talk about any of the programs that you've done for the food and beverage sector?
Yeah, again, we did a lot of work with, we were doing a lot of work with Hong Kong and food and beverage. And with the STEP program, because we wanted to make sure we covered food and ag, but then again we have WUSADA, which is the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association funded through FAS, that has a range of their own activities. So they cover a lot of different events like SIAL in China, for example, but they weren't very active in Hong Kong. So we always were supporting the Hong Kong Food Expo. And, you know, we've had companies like Hui Fong, you know, which many of you are familiar with, the famous sriracha sauce out of Irwindale. And so their company a number of times exhibited in Hong Kong with us, and actually we helped them get into a number of retailers in Hong Kong, surprisingly enough. So you have companies like Hui Fong. We have companies that were doing chocolates, a lot of wine, a lot of nuts, you know. So, you know, whether it's almonds, prepackaged almonds, raw almonds, pistachios. We've had Horizon Nut Company with pistachios. We had Poindexter Nut Company that does the they shell all of the walnuts. They've got one of the biggest shelling, you know, businesses in California. And what we've seen recently over the past couple of months, people we met with last year, HKTV, which is a Hong Kong group, which was selling products online in Hong Kong, that took off, right, because of COVID. But in these trade shows, Elizabeth and everyone, what was very common is that what used to be 10 years ago, import distributors who were coming from mainland China, for example, to look for products to represent on the mainland. 10 years ago, they were in the business of you know, selling through traditional retailers, but most all of them moved to support the online selling of even food products. So that major shift. I mean, in China, the online selling of food products is very large as a percent of their online sales as opposed to in the U.S.
Great, thank you. Well, shifting back to the online sales channel, I'd like to bring James back in. Speaking of STEP funds and how they can be used to help support some of the activities that companies are going to need to undertake to get their website globalized. Could you address that, James? Maybe he's on mute.
Yeah, you know, Elizabeth, I can share that with you because
great.
those details are actually defined on the web link that I shared with folks. So I'll make sure that everybody gets that web link. So we have a list of eligible expenses, and one of those is website localization. So that includes the website gap analysis that James was talking about earlier, and that includes somebody to create pages in other languages, to get CCTLDs, and so on and so forth. But it is listed there, and James can expand on everything Commerce is offering, but there is a list of eligible expenses on that.
Great, that sounds good. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat box, and so I just wanted to, unless any of the other speakers have anything else they'd like to bring up, I just want to close with a little bit about the U.S. Commercial Service and the way we work. There is, in the chat box, there's find a local U.S. Commercial Service office, and if you are not in Marin, Napa, Sonoma, Solano, Mendocino, Lake, Humboldt, or Del Norte County, there are questions. Okay, wonderful. Please do check. If you are in one of those counties, then that person would be me that you would talk to, and through me, I can connect you with our offices around the world who can help you find partners. So we have here, yes, there are questions. Looks like somebody may be typing right now.
And Elizabeth, while they're typing, I am going to mention that we do have some small business owners who are artisans and craft makers, including folks who identify as Native American. And I remember in our planning conversations you mentioned there might be some special opportunities there as well.
Yes. We can discuss that further with the individuals themselves, but it's not an easy thing to sell your arts and crafts internationally. However, I mean, just the level of competition and then participating in the shows, but with the right type of website that clearly identifies what you have that's unique, it can definitely be done. And American artwork, particularly Native artwork, is very popular around the world. It's just a matter of getting the exposure. The good news and bad news is we don't have any trade shows right now, and those trade shows where you would go and display your artwork are not happening because of COVID. And so the silver lining to that cloud is that you can do events virtually. And there are many trade shows that are now taking place online, which enables small, more isolated communities away from major city centers to be able to get exposure in a worldwide arena. So is that kind of an answer to your question, Layla?
It's a beginning, and we'll definitely be reconnecting with you on behalf of our clients when they're ready for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Happy to help. So there's a question here, is Japan open for the same, oh wait, I'm sorry, let me go to the top. With the current European COVID restrictions, can we send an onboard courier with fresh material there? The material is for research purposes only and has a very limited lifespan, biological material like blood, bone, etc. Is Japan open for the same purpose? It's for bio research. Does Jeff have any? Oh, here's Jeff.
Yeah,
Jeff,
I mean, for the travel issues, I'm not sure about a courier, meaning somebody who would fly from here to there, unless they had European citizenship or European permanent residence or some special permission, because now, in fact, you need a visa. There is a similar situation of needing a visa to get back into Europe if you're coming from the United States. So there's some special paperwork for that. So I think that typically you would use somebody like a DHL, and actually DHL does have couriers, and this is for Johannes. DHL is very strong in the courier business. In fact, they do drug trials in Singapore, and so all of the sort of drug trial blood work and things are brought from various countries around Southeast Asia, and they're run by couriers down to the facilities in Singapore because they got to be there within 48 hours. So DHL has a system set up for that. I'm sure FedEx and UPS do as well. I'm just familiar with DHL. So I think you still have to hire a third party that can make sure that people can get in and out of the country. Because we're not allowed to go to many places right now, United States citizens. I hope that answered the question.
Any other questions from the group? Okay, well, please do reach out to your local trade specialist, and in the chat box there are the links. The local SBDCs can provide excellent support for you if you're starting a business, if you're growing your business. There are some excellent resources that they have, and of course, please do sign up step and take advantage of the funds available from the state of California. And finally, Layla will be sending a survey afterwards regarding your experience today, and also helping us to identify next steps for you and forwarding you in the right direction. So kindly respond to it when you get it. And thank you for coming today, everyone. Thank you to our excellent speakers. Have a great day, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all. Thanks for your expertise, folks.
That concludes today's conference. Participants, you may disconnect at this time. Speakers, please allow a moment of silence for your post-conference.